No, drugs had nothing to do with his death.
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. That was proven and shown in my book.
The long-guarded autopsy files of Elvis Presley have finally been revealed, and the contents are more disturbing than the public thought. What was once hidden behind sealed reports now exposes the real truth of his final moments. The king of rock and roll's decline was far more complex, layered with troubling details that challenge the story told for decades. Every page uncovers secrets about his health, his habits, and the mysteries surrounding his last day. Join us as we unravel the disturbing record of unanswered questions and shocking discoveries. The shocking autopsy release. For many years, the truth about what happened to Elvis Presley on the day he passed away was kept hidden. The papers that held the answers were locked away, sealed from the eyes of the public and protected by strict rules. Rumors spread and people built stories around the mystery, but no one outside a small circle really knew what was inside those files. The files were not just papers, they were a key that opened the door to secrets too long buried. When the day finally came that the documents were released, it felt as if the ground shifted beneath everyone who had ever followed his life. The news of the release spread faster than anyone expected. Reporters rushed to cover it, and fans waited with eagerness. The files had been silent for decades, hidden behind locked cabinets and guarded by law. Then, without warning, they appeared in the public eye. The timing alone made it feel like a storm breaking open after years of dark clouds. People had lived for years with their own images of Elvis, the star who sang with power and moved with a style that made the world watch. For them, his story ended in sadness but still carried a sense of light. When the files came forward, the story was no longer the same. In the pages were details that painted his final hours in a different shade. It was not just about the man who performed in shining suits and filled stages with energy. It was also about the man who struggled in ways the crowd never saw. The weight of the documents was heavy not only because of the facts they revealed, but also because of the silence that had hidden them for so long. Decades of secrecy had given them a force that few other files could have. The secrecy itself made the release feel dramatic, almost like the turning of a page in history that could never be turned back. The simple act of opening those records pulled people into a new way of seeing a legend they thought they already understood. The sudden release stirred memories for those who had been there when he was alive. People recalled the moment the world learned of his demise, the shock, the mourning, and the numerous speculation that followed. With the files now open, that old wound was peeled again. It was as if time had folded, bringing the past into the present with painful force. What had been rumors and whispers now became truths printed in black ink. And though the words were plain, the effect was cutting. The discovery of what lay inside the files became more than news. It became a shared experience. Families at home turned on their televisions to listen. Fans gathered in groups to discuss what the reveal meant. There was a strange mix of disbelief and confirmation. For years, people had guessed at what had been hidden, but reading it directly was different. It was not a story passed down, not a rumor. It was the official record, and it left little space for doubt. The papers themselves carried a chill that contrasted with the warmth people remembered from Elvis's life. They were filled with medical terms, times, dates, and descriptions that stripped away the glory. It was no longer the man on stage. It was the man in private, the man in the final moments of life. That contrast cut deeply into those who adored him. To face the truth written in official words was to see that even legends cannot hide from reality. Crowds outside Graceland stood longer than usual, holding on to memories and facing the brunt of what had been revealed. Some refused to believe what they read, choosing instead to cling to the images of the star they had always carried in their hearts. Others accepted the documents as a reminder of how heavy fame can become. Either way, no one could walk away unaffected. The release had done what decades of talk never could. It placed the truth in plain sight. The reactions were immediate and overwhelming. Each page was studied, each word was debated, and each line was pulled apart in search of deeper meaning. People began to connect the details with stories from the past, linking them together like pieces of a puzzle. What was once mystery became fact, and what was once speculation became history. The files were more than paper. They were a mirror reflecting the weight of a life lived under constant light. The opening of the files marked an event that could never be reversed. For the first time, the world could see what had been hidden behind the curtain of fame and silence. The release was not just about death, it was about exposure. It was about the way truth has the power to strike even the most secure legacies. For those who followed Elvis Presley's story, the files were both a gift and a burden, offering clarity while also deepening the pain of loss. The medical findings. When the pages of the autopsy report were studied closely, the medical findings were what shocked people most. The details written by doctors revealed a body that had been under strain for years. Each line carried evidence of health battles that had built up over time. The report painted the picture of a man whose system had endured more than it could bear, and the validity of the findings left no room for denial. What had once been hidden behind glamour now appeared as a long record of physical struggle. The files described a body affected by years of improper care. Organs that were examined showed signs of damage that had developed slowly. The heart, the liver, and other vital parts no longer carried the strength of youth. Each result showed how much his health had been weakened long before the final day. The words were not filled with emotion, however. The truth behind them carried a heavy weight. It was the story of decline written in medical terms that spoke louder than rumor ever could. The findings also highlighted the effect of long-term dependence on substances meant to bring relief. Pills, prescriptions, and treatments taken for comfort were found to have built layers of ruin within him. The report made clear that the body could not keep balance under such strain. What had been a private routine was now shown as a powerful factor in the breakdown of his system. For those who read the details, it was a warning that even small choices repeated over time can shape an entire life. Doctors had written about the condition of his arteries, pointing to blockages that grew worse as the years passed. These blockages reduced the flow of blood, putting pressure on his heart and limiting the energy his body could give. The report explained how these changes did not happen overnight but built gradually, unseen by those around him. The words revealed that the struggle inside him had been ongoing, invisible to the lights, and deadly in its silence. The findings did not only list what was wrong, they showed how many parts of the body were connected in decline. One system affected another, and the strain spread like a chain reaction. The lungs, the circulation, the digestive organs each carried signs of stress. The files explained how the body tried to keep going under pressure, but eventually got to a point where balance could no longer be kept. It was not a single failure, but a series of connected collapses. Reading through the medical terms, one could see how the story of health became the story of struggle. There was even mention of weight gain that placed pressure on the heart and muscles, of sleepless nights that left the body exhausted, and of habits that gave short-term comfort but long-term harm. These were not the struggles of an artist in the spotlight, but of a man trying to manage pain, fatigue, and continuous demand. The medical findings revealed the human cost behind the legend. The details of his digestive system also drew attention, showing patterns of irregular function. This part of the report pointed to the way stress and substances combined to disturb natural balance. Even though it was written in a clinical tone, the words carried the weight of discomfort that had followed him in private. It showed a body trying to cope with the constant pressure of travel, work, and fame, while also managing the consequences of choices made to keep up with those demands. Blood samples were examined and listed, showing the presence of medications that had built up over time. The records did not simply name the substances, but noted the levels that revealed long use. This finding made clear that his health was severely impacted by the heavy presence of chemicals within his system. The mixture created a storm inside his body, one that made every organ work harder and added to the slow breakdown. The files showed how much effort the body had put into surviving under those conditions. Each organ tried to compensate for the strain of another, but the weight of the damage grew too heavy. The report suggested that the final collapse was the result of this long battle, not a sudden event without warning. It was a story of endurance that had limits, and when those limits were crossed, the body could no longer keep him alive. The most striking part of the medical findings was how demeaning the language seemed compared to the fame of the man it described. Words like enlargement, blockage, failure, and imbalance appeared again and again. These words were not for show or performance, but meant to display human fragility. The contrast made the report even harder to face, because it showed how even a figure of great fame could fall under the same struggles as anyone else. The medical findings gave a clear picture that health is not protected by success or by love from millions. The truth is that everybody has limits, and those limits can be reached more quickly when strain builds day after day. The files carried this message in numbers and observations. But behind those cold details was the life of a man who had given everything to his art. The report stripped away the image of a star and left the truth of a body that could no longer carry the burden of years of pressure. The role of lifestyle and pressure. Elvis Presley's life was defined by a routine few could handle. The constant demand of performances, tours, and public appearances created a cycle of bondage that left little room for rest. Each year was measured by the hours on stage, the trips between cities, and the tasks that followed him wherever he went. The man who appeared effortless under the spotlight carried a schedule that was tiring, a pressure that pushed his body and mind beyond what most could bear. The weight of expectation followed him at all times. Fans, media, and even those closest to him demanded energy, attention, and perfection. Every show had to be flawless, every movement on stage accurate. Behind the smiles and the movements that captivated millions, there was strain. Every note sung, every dance step executed required effort that often went unseen. The pressure was constant, wearing down even the strongest determination. Touring added its own stress. Long flights, hotel stays, and bus rides consumed hours and left little chance for recovery 2:50 to 3 o'clock. His body adapted to constant travel, but the adaptation came at a price. Irregular schedules disrupted sleep and digestion, creating cycles of fatigue that never fully ended. Changing climates, foods, and routines added invisible loads. Each day became a test of endurance, pushing him further into exhaustion. Substances became part of coping with the demands of fame. Pills meant to ease pain, improve sleep, or sustain energy slowly became a daily routine. They allowed him to perform despite exhaustion, to move forward despite the warning signs his body sent. Over time, dependence grew, and what was meant as temporary relief became a long-term addiction. Each dose masked discomfort, but it also hid the chaos building inside him. Elvis's physical image was also shaped by pressure. Weight fluctuated over time, influenced by erratic meals, travel, and stress. He tried to maintain the look expected of him on stage, for cameras, and for public appearances. The strain on his muscles, joints, and heart grew with every pound gained or lost. Even with immense energy, the body had limits that were tested daily. The demands of performance left little space for recovery. Emotional strain added another layer. Relationships, family obligations, and the private challenges of life in the public eye created tension that followed him constantly. He had little time to process emotions or enjoy healthy relationships. Each conflict, each challenge added pressure, making the burden heavier. The mind carried its own weight alongside the physical demands, creating a combination that tested both endurance and spirit. Routine medical care was difficult to maintain. The pace of life left little room for regular checkups or treatments that might have prevented further strain. Small issues went unchecked, while larger problems were addressed only as they became urgent. The combination of neglect, travel, and ongoing pressure left him vulnerable to conditions that built day after day. Even brief moments of rest were rare and often interrupted. The body never had the opportunity to fully regain strength or balance. The cycles of exhaustion and effort became constant, forming a hook that reshaped the way he moved, thought, and reacted. Every performance required effort beyond normal capacity. Every step outside the stage carried the weight of expectation. His body learned to endure, but it doesn't last forever. Muscles, joints, and organs worked overtime to meet the relentless demands. creating strain that would eventually become impossible to ignore. The lifestyle shaped every moment of daily life. Meals, sleep, movement, and even rest were controlled by the schedule of fame. Health, once natural and self-maintaining, became fragile under constant strain. The demands of public life left little room for natural rhythm or recovery. The pressures of being a global star created stress that touched every part of life, leaving traces on the body that could not be reversed overnight. Even when performing, the stress of constant attention never left. The cameras, fans, and media created an invisible presence that followed him everywhere. He moved and sang with skill, but each movement required rehearsals, even though everything appeared effortless. The mind and body were in constant negotiation, balancing what was needed for performance with what was being lost. The result was a body under continuous pressure, carrying the visible weight of fame and the hidden weight of exhaustion. The combination of travel, performance, substance use, and emotional imbalance created an environment where health was at risk. The demands of stardom shaped the way his body functioned, often without him realizing the depth of the impact. Each day became another test, and each performance another moment where the body and mind were pushed. The pressures that came with fame and expectation were relentless, shaping not only the man seen by millions but also the private struggles that went unseen. Elvis Presley's lifestyle and the pressure of fame were bound together. Every choice, every activity, every obligation contributed to a system stretched thin. Even in moments of success and celebration, the underlying effect remained. It touched his health, his energy, and his resilience. It created a life where the very tools of performance, energy, presence, and strength were constantly tested, leaving traces that could not be undone. General reactions and responses. When the news about Elvis Presley's condition and demise reached the public, the reaction was fast. Fans across the world struggled to accept the information. Streets were filled with people discussing what had happened. Television and radio carried the details repeatedly, and newspapers were covered with headlines about the life and struggles of the man they had admired for so long. The world seemed to pause, caught between disbelief and the need to understand what had actually happened. People who had grown up with his music felt a personal loss. His songs had been the soundtrack to their lives, and the news made those familiar melodies coarse. They remembered the concerts they attended, the albums they cherished, and the moments when his voice had brought excitement and joy. Now those same memories were touched by the reality of his fate. The reaction was not only about grief, but also about realizing that the man they had adored was human, with struggles no one could fully see. The family response added another layer to the story. Those closest to him faced their own grief while also managing public attention. Every move they made was observed, and every word they shared was scrutinized. They had to deal with personal sorrow alongside the responsibility of guiding the public through a difficult moment. Their pain was private, but the world demanded it be shared, creating tension and a need to maintain composure in a moment of deep vulnerability. Friends and colleagues were equally affected. People who had spent years working with him or sharing stages felt shock and sadness. They had known the man behind the fame, and the revelation of his struggles confirmed what some had suspected. Their memories of laughter, long nights, and travel with him were now framed by the awareness of the pressure he had endured. Even those who had not been close felt a pull through his music and performances, leaving everyone with a shared sense of loss. Fans reacted in multiple ways. Some gathered at places associated with him, carrying flowers, photos, or CDs as tokens of remembrance. They expressed their feelings in silence and in small gatherings, creating temporary communities of mourning. Others processed the news privately, turning to his music as a comfort or recalling past performances. The public's reaction reflected a mixture of grief, admiration, and reflection on the reality behind the image of a global star. Media coverage intensified the public response. Every detail from the autopsy findings to accounts of his health and lifestyle was reported repeatedly. People dissected every piece of information, trying to understand how a man so vibrant and talented could face such struggles. The intensity of coverage amplified the emotions of the fans, turning private feelings into experiences that spanned countries and generations. The public response became part of the ongoing story, shaping the way his life and end were remembered. The family faced difficult decisions during this period. They had to manage private grief while guiding the world through mourning. Choices about public statements, memorials, and the preservation of his legacy were made under intense scrutiny. Every step was measured against the public's expectations, and each action carried significance beyond personal loss. The balance between private sorrow and public duty created pressure that mirrored, in a way, the pressure Elvis had lived through. Public memorials emerged spontaneously. Vigils, gatherings, and commemorations appeared in multiple locations, reflecting the widespread impact he had. Fans tried to honor him collectively, creating spaces where grief could be shared and where memories could be celebrated. The response showed the reach of his influence and the emotional connection that millions had felt over decades. His presence, even after he was gone, continued to inspire and affect people deeply. The reaction was also shaped by the contrast between his public persona and private struggles. People realized that the man they had admired for talent and charisma had faced challenges that were hidden from view. The difference between the image on stage and the reality offstage added depth to public mourning. Admiration was mixed with sorrow, and the need to reconcile the two created a more complex response than simple grief alone. Family, friends, and fans also reflected on the lessons of his life. Observers considered the pain of fame, the pressures of performance, and the human cost of living in the spotlight. His life became a case study in how talent and popularity intersect with vulnerability, creating empathy and reflection. The public's reaction held an element of introspection, as people thought about their own lives and the pressures they faced, comparing them to the intensity of a life lived under constant attention. The scale of the reaction was extraordinary. Crowds, media coverage, and personal reflection combined to create a sense of global mourning. His music, performances, and persona became lenses through which people processed loss. Family members acted as anchors in the storm, trying to guide public understanding while navigating their own emotions. The result was a complex and layered response that highlighted both the reach of his influence and the extent of human connection to his life story. Even years after the news broke, the public reaction remained significant. Fans continued to visit memorials, play his music, and celebrate his achievements. The family's efforts to preserve his legacy created a framework for remembrance that allowed the public to honor him safely. The interaction between private mourning and public homage became a defining feature of how his life was remembered, showing the lasting effect of both his work and the struggles he had endured. A transformed legacy. Elvis Presley's life left a mark that reached far beyond music. His influence had shaped generations, and the details revealed after his passing added new layers to the story of his life. People began to see not only the performer, but also the man behind the fame. The struggles, pressures, and challenges he faced gave his accomplishments a new significance. His legacy became more than records and concerts. It became a story of human vulnerability intertwined with extraordinary talent. The revelations encouraged people to rethink the man they had seen on stage. Elvis had been seen as almost untouchable, a figure larger than life, but the truth showed that even legends could face problems. Fans who had idolized him for his charisma and energy now understood the physical and emotional effort behind each performance. This deeper insight into his life gave a sense of respect and empathy that extended beyond admiration for his music. His artistic achievements took on a different meaning in light of the struggles he endured. Every song performed and every move on stage carried the weight of years of hard work, sacrifice, and coping with personal challenges. Fans and historians began to appreciate not just the talent but the persistence it required 343 to 353. His performances became a testament to determination, showing that greatness often comes at a personal cost that few truly see. The legacy also shaped the way people thought about fame. Elvis's life illustrated the pressures that come with extraordinary visibility. The public began to recognize that the bright lights of fame often hide fatigue, stress, and vulnerability. Observers saw how constant attention, expectations, and criticism could affect a person physically and mentally. This realization created conversations about the human side of celebrity, encouraging empathy for those who live in the spotlight. Elvis's influence on music and culture was enhanced by the context of his life. People realized that his energy, style, and innovations were achieved despite obstacles that could have broken someone less determined. His approach to performance, his blend of musical genres, and his ability to connect with audiences became even more impressive when seen alongside the challenges he managed. The legacy was not only creative, but also a story of resilience. Fans and new generations approached his music differently after learning more about his life. Listening to his songs, watching his films, or remembering his performances carried a new emotional depth. People now understood that the power of his work was inseparable from the struggle he had faced. His voice, movements, and stage presence became symbols not just of talent, but of persistence in the face of physical and mental strain. The family played a key role in shaping this legacy. Through careful preservation of his memory, management of archives, and engagement with fans, they ensured that the story of his life remained complete. The combination of public achievements and private struggles created a full picture. The family's guidance allowed people to appreciate both sides of his life, the performer and the man, without losing sight of the humanity behind the legend. The broader cultural impact was profound. Artists, musicians, and entertainers studied not only his style, but also the demands he had faced to achieve success. They saw that talent alone was not enough. Endurance, discipline, and the ability to handle pressure were also critical. His legacy became a model for how dedication intersects with creativity, inspiring others to push boundaries while understanding personal limits. The public narrative shifted with time. Instead of focusing only on early fame or record sales, people began to discuss the totality of his life, the highs, the lows, and the lessons in his story. The revelations about his health, lifestyle, and pressures added layers to public memory, making his life a story of triumph and struggle. Audiences honored his achievements while also recognizing the challenges he faced, creating a more balanced understanding of the man behind the music. Elvis's legacy also influenced the way people viewed mortality and the human body. The contrast between his immense public presence and his private vulnerabilities became a reminder that no one is immune to life's pressures. His story encouraged reflection on the ways people cope with stress, fame, and responsibility. By witnessing his journey, fans and observers could connect their admiration for his accomplishments with awareness of human limitations. Thanks to these revelations, Elvis Presley's life would remain compelling for generations. His work and influence were immortal, but the story of the challenges he faced made the legend richer and more relatable. His life became a study in talent, pressure, resilience, and consequence, offering lessons for both artists and audiences. His music continued to inspire, but the story of the man behind it deepened the impact, making his legacy lasting, complex, and unforgettable. Do you think there was any way Elvis Presley could have escaped the consequences he faced? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.